Hello, welcome to this panel at the 2020 AI Music Creativity Conference. This panel is about the 2020 AI Music Generation Challenge. My name is Bob Sturm, and let me share my screen. So this panel is dedicated to this interesting challenge, and with me are the four judges that participated this year. Henrik Norbeck, Jenica Anderson, Paddy O'Connor, and Kevin Glacken. And let's each take a little bit of time to introduce ourselves, please, starting with Henrik. Henrik, can you unmute? There you go. Henrik, can you hear me? But I can't hear you. There we are.
Fine. Yeah, it said the host won't allow people to unmute themselves.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, yes, I've been into Irish music for more than 30 years. I've been playing flute and whistle since I was at the Flacciol in Sligo in 1988. And I heard some flute players there in the middle of the night, and I just decided this is what I want to do. So, and I transcribed every single tune I've learned. So that's about 2,600. And, but I've forgotten about half of them. So yeah, and I've gone through a lot of collections to played through them just to learn about the music.
Thank you, Henrik. Jenica Anderson.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Jennica Anderson, and I was brought up in the countryside in Hälsingland, north of Sweden, from a Danish mother and a Swiss father. And when I was 17, I heard Irish music, and that was it. I decided this is what I'm going to do in my life. So I went to Ireland and studied for about 15 years, going back and forth, Sweden, Ireland. And then I founded my own music education, Irish traditional music education in Sweden. So I'm teaching on that course now for the 12th year. And I also play in a couple of small bands, like one Ceilidh band and some duos and trios. And that's it, yeah.
Thank you. Paddy O'Connor.
Hi there. I come from County Kerry, from the Slieve Lucra area of Ireland. It's associated mostly with polkas and slides. The kind of famous musicians to come from that area would be Paddy Cronin, Padraig O'Keefe, Dennis Murphy, Julia Clifford. I've spent a lot of my time over the years studying the music of that area, and the big hero of mine would have been Johnny O'Leary, the accordion player, when I was growing up. I live in Dublin now. And since I moved to Dublin, I kind of play a much wider repertoire, from playing with the likes of Kevin Glacken and my other buddies in Dublin, get to play music from all over Ireland. So spend most of my time teaching music and performing at festivals, etc. And yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you. And Kevin Glacken. You're on mute.
Hey, how are we doing now? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Kevin Glacken. I born and reared in Dublin. I grew up in a musical household. I learned to fiddle in the kind of traditional way. I learned it from my father at home in the house. I have just played around Dublin all my life. Taught at a lot of the festivals, Milltown Abbey, the Willie Clancy Summer School, Cargiston Fiddlery. I currently teach at the TU Dublin in the Conservatory of Music and Drama. I teach to undergraduates and postgraduates who are doing degrees in traditional music performance.
Thank you very much. We got to mute yourself. Kevin, mute.
Sure, okay.
Thank you. All right, so what was the 2020 challenge? Well, It was to build an artificial system that generates the most plausible double jigs as judged against this particular collection, 365 double jigs published in the Dance Music of Ireland by Captain Francis O'Neill in 1907. Why this particular collection? It's recognized and a well-studied collection. Many of the tunes are still played today. Many of the tunes are not played today. And the structures of the tunes is clear and consistent. And finally, computer encodings exist, so we can allow our data-hungry algorithms to range over them. The aims of the challenge did not include generating an unlimited number of double jigs to flood the world of traditional music. It was instead to three things: promote meaningful approaches to evaluating music AI, to see how music AI research can benefit from considering traditional music and vice versa, and to facilitate discussions about the ethics of music AI research applied to traditional music practices. So to submit to this challenge, a participant had to build a system that generates music that's rendered either as ABC staff notation, MIDI, or MP3 compressed files. Their system had to generate 10,000 tunes, and they had to write and submit a brief technical document describing that system. The judging procedure is as follows. Experimental materials are assembled by selecting at random from the 10,000 5 from each submission. Each judge assesses all the tunes, and if a tune passes 4 rejection criteria, then the judges assess the tunes on a scale of 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, of the following statements: that the melody is characteristic of double jigs, the structure and coherence are characteristic, the tune's playable, the tune is memorable, and the tune is interesting. And the 4 criteria for rejection is: if the tune is plagiarized, it's rejected outright. If the rhythm's not close to a double jig or can't be played with such a rhythm, it's out for that reason. If the pitch range is not characteristic, or if the modes and accidentals are not characteristic and cannot be made so by transposition. So we had a benchmark and 6 submissions. The benchmark is some system that's trained in 2016 on several tens of thousands of tunes from the session website. And it was just primed with a 6-8 meter token so that it would generate perhaps jigs that would be competitive. 3 teams sent ABC that were then rendered as staff notation, and I've selected names from Irish towns for the teams that submitted. 1 team sent staff notation in PDF, and 2 teams sent MIDI files that were then rendered as MP3. So here we have along the in each row a tune, the particular number in the 10,000 that was selected, and the 4 judges' statements on the 5 statements for each one of them. And we see one of these tunes, 1641, is rejected outright for plagiarism. 1 judge rejected 4101 for the range, the tessitura of the melodic line, but the other tunes passed. So Team Glendart is, their 5 tunes were all rejected based on rhythmic characteristics. The rhythm wasn't close to that of a double jig. Team Shandon also rejected all 5 selected tunes because the rhythm was not close to that of a double jig. Team Carrick had 1 tune that was not plagiarized, 4 tunes that were plagiarized, and that 1 tune that was plagiarized received a smattering of all scores. Team Killashandra had 2 plagiarized tunes, 1 that was rejected by 3 judges for rhythmic reasons, and 2 tunes that passed through and were graded. Team Tralaban had all tunes passed through. There was no plagiarism. They all passed the 4 checks and were assessed on their merits of these 5 characteristics. And finally, Team Connacht, also all tunes passed through the 4 criteria. So here is an example tune from Team Connacht. This tune received very good scores from most of the musicians, most of the judges, and we will hear it performed by Henrik Norbeck.
Yes. So I had to transpose this up from D to G to be able to play it well on the flute, but then it goes well actually on the flute. So yes, here's the tune. And I don't have a title for it really, so we'll call it 3441.
Very nicely done.
I've changed it around a bit from what from the exact notes there. So small little things that would just make it sound more Irish, I suppose.
And what was there a particular characteristic that turned you on to this tune?
It goes well on the flute because it's the flute player's best friend. It's in G major, so if I transpose it, so it goes well on the flute.
Good. Thank you. I think 3441 is a fine title for it. So that takes us to the second place winner of the competition, and Nicole Anderson will perform this jig.
And I call it the Lonesome Fairy.
Lovely playing. What's about this tune did you find interesting and nice?
Yeah, first of all, it was the first tune in minor that I came across in all the tunes I examined. And I liked that, the Dorian key. And I liked the way it was going up in the beginning, not staying between just 2 or 3 notes, but really developing up from mid or low up to high, and then coming back. And I really love the part when it goes la da 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 ba ba, and that kind of brings in new energy into it, and I really like that. So always when I come there, I feel like playing around with it. And I like that the second part, I like all the bars are different. There is no bar that's the same, apart from the endings that are a little bit similar, but still they're not the same. So that is also one thing I like. And at the end of the second part, I like when it goes ra-di da da ba daddle da da. That's kind of nice. Like now we're going into an ending. So I think it's very musical tune, that. And I also changed some small parts of it that just didn't play when I played it, so I just left them, like a small thing in the in the third bar of the second part, for example, there's a little extra thing that I just left out. Yeah, but I really liked it just from the first hearing of it.
It fits under your instrument very well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, the scores for the judges from this one, 7983. This is from actually produced by the benchmark system, and it was well liked by many of the judges. Even perfect scores from Kevin Glacken on that one. That takes us to the first prize jig, and this will be performed by Paddy O'Connor.
Hi there. I'll play the tune first, and sure, I'll answer a few questions in about it and let you know why I liked it.
Brilliant playing.
Lovely.
So what turned you on to this tune?
It was one of the few tunes that managed to have 6 notes in the majority of the bars, which meant that that primary beat of a double jig was maintained all the way through. A lot of them suffered from having far too many crotchets followed by a quiver, which led to more a slip jig type rhythm, whereas this used long notes sparingly and always at the right time. So the rhythm was always consistent with that of the double jig, and it would satisfy the needs of a dancer who'd be battering out, say, a hard shoe double jig, which I always find is a good test of a double jig. The second thing is the melody had just the right amount of repetition. Lots of the tunes just kept going, but there was no repetition in them. If you don't have the right amount of repetition, you can't progress the melody properly from the first part to the second part. They come across as two unrelated tunes. This had just the right hints of repetition in the first part and the second part to allow the logical progression of the melody from one part to the other, and both parts then resolved the same way, which gave a kind of an air of certainty to the tune and gave it good grounding and good foundation.
I noticed that in the first measure you had changed it to match the second measure.
Yeah, just a small little bit. And the other thing there is that unknowns probably maybe to the composer, the second part is definitely in A major, especially the first couple of bars. So I changed that C from C sharp to C natural, and it definitely plays much better. I thought with the idea of maintaining the C sharp as it was on the staff notation, but I think definitely the tune just goes too far to A major at the start of the second part. So that was the main change as well I made that did affect the melody.
Are such problems apparent in O'Neill's collection as well?
Definitely. I mean, I often I might pick up sometimes if I'm sitting at home and I'm bored someday, I might just pick up a tin whistle and start just playing through some of the tunes. And it's only after making such alterations suddenly that you can actually pick the melody from the tune. So it wouldn't be unknown to come across that problem in the book.
Do you have a title for this tune?
Yeah, there was a neighbor of mine I learned a lot of music from, and like AI is artificial intelligence. This fellow was a farmer and he was also an AI man, but had nothing to do with computing. So if you can figure out what AI is, so I'm going to call it the AI man. And if anybody's out there, you can figure out what an AI man is in farming.
The AI man. Okay, great. So this tune was also well liked, and it received 2 perfect scores from 2 judges, and then almost perfect scores from another judge. And it can be revealed that the team that produced this one, Team Connacht, this is actually Folk RNN system version 2 using beam search sampling. Nothing was changed in its training. It was just applying beam search for pairs of tokens. And the big addition was an AI critic that would work through a bunch of generated material by the system and choose ones that were most similar to the jigs that are in the 365 in O'Neill's. So that takes us to this last tune. We have first and second prizes and the honorable mentions, I guess. And this tune will be performed by Kevin Glacken.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Nicely played.
Okay.
What about this tune interested you?
Okay, a lot of the tunes that I suppose really what attracts me about melody in terms of Irish music is I love the notion of a melody where it's like a conversation, right? And there's something going on within the melody. It's kind of like a conversation. And this, like a lot of Irish traditional music sometimes is structured in a way that the first part is the question and the second part is the answer. Some of them then are structured, the first 4 bars will be the question, the second 4 bars is the answer, and then the second part will be a new question and another answer, and sometimes the answer will be taken from the first part in. So it's kind of, it works that way. So this thing, the minute I played it, it had all that sort of quality. So like, you know, when you go like, that's the question, and here's the answer. And then the second part again, question. And the answer. So it's a sort of, it has, you know, if I was, I suppose maybe going to teach somebody maybe even at a beginner, intermediate level, that's the sort of jig I'd put them. As you progress and like, you know, as you kind of get into more kind of sophisticated tunes, the conversation gets, you know, it gets more intense and maybe it's not, but that just followed the simple melodies. It sounds Irish to me and it's, yeah, grand tune.
Did you find that missing quite a lot in the computer-generated tunes you analyzed?
Sorry, Bob?
Did you find that quality missing from the tunes that you generated?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, that's the tune that I was given to perform. I'm not saying that was my favourite tune in it, but it has all the structures and all the criteria there for a double jig, and I'd have no problem teaching that tune to any student. Yeah.
It's the tune that Paddy played that seemed to be the favourite.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be my favourite, but look, that's fair enough. It's up there. It was up there. It was right up there. But look, I mean, that's you're splitting hairs at that stage.
Great. And do you have a title?
Yeah. It's called The Famous 5 in a Row.
And what does that refer to?
That refers to Ask Polly. Polly would probably fill you better than that one.
Sorry, my connection broke. Say that again.
Well, look at the title of it, and he asked me to explain the title. Will you explain it to him?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, Dublin beat Kerry in the All Ireland Football Championship at the end of last year. It's been a big battle between Kerry and Dublin over the last 80 years to see which one of them were going to win 5 All Irelands in a row, and Dublin did it last September, beating Kerry. So it's something that's a real sore point with me.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kevin. The origin of this tune. Okay, so here are the scores from the judges. This tune actually came from an experimental system that was not competing. It was a folk R&N system that was trained on the session and O'Neill's, but fine-tuned on O'Neill's. And I didn't want to submit 2 systems to the competition, so before the judging even started, I decided on the one system that would be judged with all the others and keep this one as something to analyze later on, but it was not in the competition. But Kevin, after the other tunes were taken, this is a suggestion that Kevin said, I'll play this one. Thank you very much for all those performances. When we did the second stage in the competition, it was to judge whether we just got lucky on selecting the tunes from the collection. So the second phase was performed on 4 systems, including the benchmark, to determine whether the quality was medium or low or high of these systems. And so 4 tunes are selected at random from each of these collections generated by these systems. And we spent some time over Zoom going over these 16 transcriptions to give it a thumbs up, a middling thumbs, or a thumbs down. And we're going to count the number of tunes that have at least 1 thumbs up. What I've noticed is that some judges would rate very highly a particular tune, and other judges would rate very low. So in the interest of erring on the side or giving benefit of the doubt, I think at least 1 thumbs up is a winner for a tune. And then of the remainder that didn't receive thumbs up, count the number of tunes that have at least 1 middling thumb. And so with the benchmark, we see there was 1 thumbs up among the 4 and 0 middling thumbs. That means there's 3 very poor grades. Team Connacht had 2 thumbs up and 0 middling thumbs. Team Kilishandra, 1 thumbs up and 1 middling thumb, and Tralaban, 1 thumbs up and no thumbs, middling thumbs. So no award is given to the quality assessment of these systems. They're all producing equally poor material output. So I'd like to open up the discussion to the judges and pose this question. Are we, as in the AI scientists, applying machine learning to Irish traditional music in terms of these jigs? Are we there yet? And anyone who would like to start.
Bob? Yeah, I think that music almost needs to kind of connect with the people or where people come from, and you feel that when you play the tune. You can kind of feel, sometimes you play a tune and you, without even knowing where it came from, you said that tune comes from County Clare, or somebody who plays music in County Clare. You know by the style of the tune or the way that the tune pulls you into a certain style of playing. I found with an awful lot of the submissions, I wasn't getting pulled one way or the other. I found that I just couldn't connect with the land or the people, or lots that connection with the earth just wasn't in a lot of the tunes. It was in some of the tunes are right at the very top of the scoring chart, but for the majority of them it wasn't there. You could tell that they were written by a machine. There was just some lack of connectivity, or I couldn't feel what the composer felt when they wrote the tune. Whereas often the really nice new tunes, every now and again somebody writes a really good new tune and you feel something, and you often can make a fair stab at where that tune came from or what style of music that particular musician plays, and I found it very hard to make that connection with an awful lot of the tunes.
Yeah, I agree with Paddy here. Also because the tunes don't have any names makes it difficult to get any kind of, thoughts going, or, build up some worlds, or, yeah. So, many of the tunes felt soulless in a way. And of course you can make music out of many things, but then you have to change quite a few things in many of the notes, or the compositions. So there were only very few that I thought was up to
One thing I thought Yeah. One thing that I thought of was that there are a lot of tunes being composed by humans today too, even though you might not expect it in this AI age. But also, I find that with a lot of the newly composed tunes that are actually with known composers, a lot of them are they don't catch me in any way. Very few of the new tunes, if you they don't catch my attention,
Yeah.
and I see that also with tunes. I've tried to compose a few tunes myself, about 20 tunes, and uh, only one of them is actually played by anyone except myself. So there are a few people who play one of my 20 tunes. So if you can actually make an AI make one tune out of 20 decent enough to be played now and then, I think you're actually quite successful.
Fair point.
That's an interesting a point. 1 out of 20. It's oftentimes problematic to compare these algorithms that produce thousands and thousands of tunes at the click of a button to humans that take many, weeks or months of fine tuning a particular tune and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And in the time that you had to practice these computer generated tunes, did you see your interpretation of it change?
Yeah.
And how did it change?
Soften out some jumps, maybe, to make it more together, like glue some like theme or some line or some story. So yeah, because there were sometimes very big gaps in the melody, like jumping like a sixth or a ninth or something, and those disappear after playing it.
Very uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
What about you, Potty?
Um, Again, I'd agree what Yannicka is saying with regard to the melody. Like there was just big gaps. But the other thing, I think if somebody sat down to write a double jig, they would be more cognizant of the actual rhythm within the bar. It was a real bee in my bonnet is this crotch before a quaver in each of the bars. Like it basically it was like they played like slip jigs with 2 extra bars rather than a double jig. And like I think a lot of the composers, if they were cognizant of that before they started pressing the button again, they may have created far better quality melodies with a structure or a rhythm that's more consistent with the double jig. I think if that was relayed maybe to the competitors, I don't know the nuances of exactly how the system goes or how the algorithms are written or applied, but the bottom line is if that became a stronger point to consider before they went at it again, I'd be confident that a lot of them would write tunes of greater merit. It was just such a big consistent problem right the way through.
Yeah. Kevin, would you have any words about uh, the states of AI within this competition? Were you impressed or definitely not impressed?
Yeah, can you hear me, Bob? Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Yeah, and you see, I suppose what attracted me, or what attracts me to Irish music, is the notion that maybe 150 years ago, music was it was part of a process of social interaction among people in Ireland because they had nothing else, right? So all these tunes were kind of passed, and there's a human element to these tunes. Like, for example, we say Paddy mentioned a few of the players down there that in his area, Slieve Lucre, mentioned Dennis Murphy, Julie Clifton. Like, I could start naming tunes that just particularly associate with those individuals, right? So, you know, the notion of me being able to go down to Paddy's part of the country and sit down and play and connect with, we say, with Paddy or with maybe some of the older musicians, it's a bit like the Aboriginal with the song lines, that the way that these things were handed down to these people and that this became their map, right? So that's where kind of, like Paddy said, that's where I kind of have a connection with Irish music. And I found that the majority of what was on the 50 jigs that I had to look at, there might have been about maybe 4 or 5 that I began to see. Well, do you know what? Maybe there's a first cousin here. Maybe there's a second cousin of what it was about. But like there was a lot, like in particular to the MP3s. I mean, that just bore absolutely. I'm sorry, it was just nothing to me. It left me just cold. So I mean, the couple of tunes that Paddy played and that Annika and Henry played, yeah, like there was nothing about it that they were the best of the whole lot of them that was there. So the notion of me being, or, that AI can come in and just can compose a tune that's going to move me like the way a piece of music from Steve Lukather, that's never going to happen to me. That's all I can say. For me, that's all.
Great point. One of the interesting things that I noticed in this challenge is the issue of plagiarism, and that it wasn't so easy to spot at first. It took time to look at the tune, play through it, and it triggered something in your mind. Each of you is carrying around thousands and thousands of tunes in your head. Could you describe these dealing with plagiarism and detecting them in the collections that you have found? Yes, Kevin. You unmute.
Sorry, Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Bob, when I was going through them and I saw the scores in front of me, the minute a tune made sense and sounded good to me, I put it straight into PayPal, and invariably it was plagiarized. The minute
So you
I said, "Oh wow,
detected them.
that's a nice tune," bang, put it in, there it goes. That's the way it sounded to me, anyway.
Yeah, continue.
I want to say something on what you just talked about there with learning the tunes and the connection with the people. Can
Yes.
I say? Because when I heard this music, it was like, how can I say, the first truth that came to me was I need to go to Ireland to learn this. So that's why I spent all these years traveling back and forth and learning, especially around Ennis and along the west coast. And to me, like, to go into the countryside and to go to the water and to go to people's houses and to be in the in the surrounding, that was like such a big part of it, and I felt like I couldn't learn this music without having done that. And even I met many people in Ireland who said to me, actually, you need to learn the Irish language, because it's then that you will understand this music thoroughly. So yeah, I went to churches to listen to preachers because they were talking Gaelic. So I didn't learn the language, but it's funny to think if I had heard this music and then there was this AI system that just provided me with the 4,000 tunes, and I just sit down here in Sweden and learn all these tunes, that just wouldn't be as fun or as interesting. It just wouldn't give the whole, like, all the bones and all the flesh and all the spirit that needs to come, or that is in these tunes, or connected with them.
That's a beautiful point. And one of the points of contention that I hear from people that really don't appreciate what people like me are doing with this kind of music, that it's so connected to a language, to a history, to a people, to folklore, that they would see it as sacrilegious in some way that you apply a computer to this data. Returning to the plagiarism bit, Paddy, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the tunes, I wouldn't call it outright plagiarism. Say there was a version there of the humours of Innes Diamond, and then there was a lot of similarities with the humours of Innes Diamond in the first part, and then suddenly the tune seemed to go off in a completely different direction in the second part. And that actually happened in a lot of the tunes where there was no plagiarism either. Tunes, there seemed to be elements of one particular type of tune in the first half, maybe not strong enough to be plagiarized, but then it just went off in a complete tangent altogether in the second part, and there were like two unrelated melodies. So it wasn't like there was like when somebody plagiarizes an essay and you can see something that's following right through the whole essay that's been written. But I didn't find it was that type of plagiarism. It was a different type of plagiarism in a lot of the cases where there was just maybe a phrase or two, or maybe three phrases. So maybe three phrases out of four in the first part were very close to a tune. It was enough to deem it to be plagiarism. And then the second part was completely unrelated. And that happened quite a bit. I don't know exactly what's the technical reason for that, but I did come across it quite a bit.
Henrik, you had your hand up.
Yeah, there was an interesting thing. There was the tune that I first decided to play, which was actually it's in a minor key, and I decided, yeah, this one is okay to play for this occasion. And then yesterday, I just realized, because I was singing it to myself in my head while I was making food, and I just realized, no, there's something too familiar. And I changed it to the major key, and I just realized, oh, this is Tobin's favorite. This is one of the tunes that's actually in O'Neill's. It's so I had to pick another tune instead. So and that's it. It takes some time sometimes, because I didn't even figure that at first when I was going through the tunes, because that kind of plagiarism is harder to detect. Also, because I did do some ABC searches. I have made a program to search for that through I have that since before, to search for tunes, to search for similar tunes, and I didn't. So I did that actually for the tunes that I found scored well. But this I didn't even get my program to catch this one.
Do you happen to know what happened or why?
It was probably because there were too many. There were too many factors that were different. First of all, it was minor to major. It was another. It was transposed to another key, and then slightly different. So, but still very similar.
Okay.
And I
There's a
probably searched for the wrong phrase. If I'd searched for a longer phrase, if I'd searched for the whole 8 first bars, I would probably have found it. But I probably just searched for 2 bars or something, just to check if this actually exists already.
there's a
So,
question.
but I also found that there was a tendency towards plagiarism in the tunes that were generated, and I think that's because the AI had obviously learned something. It had learned from being trained on a collection, and since it had trained on that collection, well, it will, of course, generate something like it, and but it was a bit too much like it. So there's some kind of innovation lacking in it, and when the innovation comes, it becomes maybe a bit too much. So it's hard to find the balance between sticking to the tradition and innovation.
The people in the audience who are machine learning experts will understand this fact very clearly, that the model has been too focused on reproducing a specific example from its training data, and that's what happens. One person is asking in the audience, it would be interesting to know what was seen as plagiarism. Were any pieces rejected for copying rhythm despite new pitch content, for example?
No.
I didn't exactly understand that question. Can you repeat?
So one aspect of plagiarism is that the melody is exactly the same, but another aspect is the melody's the same but up to a transposition, or perhaps the melody is the same but the rhythm is different, or perhaps the melody is different but the rhythm is the same. So you could plagiarize, certain qualities or characteristics of melodies or pieces. Yeah, Paddy.
I think with regard to, say, you can say, oh, the melody is the same, but the rhythm is different. You're operating there within a very tight band when you're playing a double jig. I mean, there isn't a whole pile of leverage there to mess about with the rhythm, or suddenly you're out of double jigs zone very, very fast or very quickly. So the whole idea of having the same melody and having but a different type of rhythm, I think, is probably almost an impossibility.
It doesn't really apply to this genre of music.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes.
However, sorry, can I say something?
Yeah.
There were maybe 2 or 3 tunes that I thought sounded like something I play. For example, Out on the Ocean, or The Rose in the Heather, da da ba diddle da 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 da, and just the first few words, the way it stays on da da, like a long note, and not goes da 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 diddle da da, and so that happened, but not very often. So is that what you mean? That it sounded like a tune, but it
That could
wasn't
be,
that
yeah.
melody, like,
That
yeah,
could be.
yeah.
One of the interesting discussions that we had at the beginning of our meeting to discuss our results is what is the meaning or relative importance of the 5 characteristics that you judged, and that's structure, melody, playability, interestingness, and memorability. Would anyone like to comment on these qualities for double jigs and O'Neill's?
I can go first.
Yeah.
As we were discussing there the last day, definitely for me, structure is the first thing. If it doesn't have the 8 bars in the verse, basically, it's not a double jig. That there's very little leverage there with regard to the structure. The second thing then is that the melody within the tune has to be consistent with a double jig, and kind of the way you've got your 6 notes per bar are as close as possible as you move through it. And I mean, there are situations where, as I said, I keep getting back to this crotchet followed by a quaver. You can do a little bit of it, but you can't do a lot of it, or else suddenly your double jig plays like a slip jig with 2 extra bars, and so many of the tunes fell into that hole. So basically, the first thing for me really was structure. If the structure wasn't there, and as I said, if somebody couldn't dance a double jig to it, well, then the structure isn't in it, and therefore you're automatically excluded. So that's the first port of call. After that, then melody and what sort of rhythms run through the melody. Is the rhythm within the melody consistent to a kind of a classic double jig from within O'Neill's? So they'd be my starting points.
Kevin, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me, Bob? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what Paddy's saying in terms of structure. Absolutely. But the second thing, then, Bob, and I'm just going to kind of come back to the point I made earlier, is that there has to be some sort of a kind of a little journey within the tune. There has to be a conversation going on, not just a kind of a whole list of notes just repeated or thrown in and out. It has to have a melodic structure, and that to me is what attracts me. The melody can be the most basic melody based around 4 notes, but if it's structured in that there's beginning and end to it, and that you're pulling maybe the second part, you'll be pulling back into the first part, but that it all connects and that it forms this kind of musical conversation within the tune itself, that's what attracts me.
Henrik or Jennifer?
Did you say Henrik or Jannikel?
Yes.
Or both?
Either of you?
Okay. So now I get a chance to correct myself as well, because I started the other day with saying that I didn't find structure as important, but I found the melody was the most important. But that, of course, that was because I thought, well, the whole thing is to write a double jig, so then it has to be a double jig. So then the structure, like below that, that's how I was thinking. But I totally 100% agree that it has to be the structure of a double jig, of course, to be a double jig. Otherwise, it's out. So I think Paddy made it very clear and nice the way, with structure and then melody and then playability, which then comes down to if it has something interesting and if it's memorable. So what I liked about the tune that I played was that it was like a fairy tale, a story kind of, So even though there was no bars repeated, well, there is actually one bar repeated in the first part. The diddle die, daddle die. It goes twice, yeah. But in a different way. It's usually like it's the first bar and then the fifth is repeating the first. But this tune has it So yeah, if you want to put up the notes, if people want to see it, but otherwise, I think it manages to be an interesting story. The first part developing some theme, and then the second part, going into some a little bit more melancholy kind of feeling, and then ending in a nice, giving way, I find. Yeah. So anyway, thanks.
Good description. Henrik, it was actually a pre-test that we performed that we came up with these characteristics to judge.
Yeah, because I was thinking, you asked me to think of what parameters should we look at. And I sort of made this very long list of different parameters, and then you sorted them into different categories. I think that's the way we went, wasn't it?
Yeah.
More or less, that you sorted these into categories, and we found the playability, and that's one thing that it also applies to if the melody is characteristic, then you have these figures that you're used to from learning a few hundred jigs. You're used to certain melodic figures, and if they don't turn don't turn up these melodic figures, then you stumble on the tune. And I noticed that on Sunday night when we had our meeting together and discussed this, that I stumbled on trying to play the tune. I stumbled. I couldn't play it properly because there was something strange in the tune, and it's then you realize that the playability it goes hand in hand with the melody. If the melody is characteristic, then it's usually playable too, and vice versa.
Yep. There's a comment, and this inspires a question. You received materials in two different forms. One is a PDF of notation, and one was an MP3 or audio file. And can you describe how you judged these different materials and what advantages one has over the other for this particular kind of music challenge?
Well, I would have liked to have all of them actually as audio, because then I can listen to the tunes and say, I can listen to them and say this is good, or this is not, this sounds strange, weird tune. And so actually it would have been better to have them all in the same format. Now I had to play, but they were so different. The two collections that came in MP3 format were so far removed from what you'd expect from O'Neill's, so it wasn't any question. But if one of them had been more similar to, had a higher score, it would have had you would have had a different way of looking at them if you have to play them from the sheet music, or if you have to listen to them. So as a judge, for future competitions where perhaps you would have maybe learn from this one, and all the teams produce something better, then I would think that it would be better actually to have all the judges receive the music in the same format.
Yeah.
From all teams.
And that would be audio.
Yeah.
Perhaps, or it depends on the kind of music, I guess. If you're looking into a competition of classical music, but I suppose audio is still the best, because that's what music really is. It is audio, whatever music you're playing.
Just a question there with regard to some of the audios. Lots of them had very kind of illogical gaps in the music, and it was hard to decipher. Even if it was all knitted together, there was like big pauses and gaps within the tune that, even if they weren't knitted together and the music was slowed down, it was hard to actually decipher what could it actually be played as a jig. It would have been handy if there was accompanying notes at least. You would have been able to use some element of conjecture to actually say, right, these are the notes, I can actually knit this together and I can make a jig out of it. I just think by listening to lots of the MP3s, which had kind of fairly intrinsic faults in them, that if the notes were there to accompany, we might have been able to make more sense of those MP3s and give them a fairer hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jenical?
Yeah. What can I add to this? Yeah, like we already said, the audio files were not up to standard at all. Like I couldn't hear any jig rhythm in them. So I tried for one, and then I wondered, will I write these notes down and then try and make it into a jig? But I didn't do that because it would just take too much time. And I would also be very interested in hearing them as audio files, although I liked to be able to see the structure very clearly with the notes. So I could imagine having audio files and the scores, even though I don't play very much by scores, so it takes a while. I get tired, from trying to understand the music from the scores. But yeah, I wonder, can you find something? Is it possible to find some machine to play the music in the right rhythm and with the same, with the right like duration within the notes and everything, like all these parameters, and with
We're working on it.
ornaments, because the ornament is such a big thing, it's such a big part of making the rhythm. So if you don't make ornaments, then it's gonna, how can you, is it even possible at all to have audio files sound like Irish music made by a computer?
We're working on it. Kevin, you had your hand raised.
Can you hear me, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, just what Jennifer said and Henrik too, just in terms of having audio files, I find, and the only other place I can judge this is on TunePal. It's when they play a tune back to me on them audio files, I think they sound desperate. I think the tune is completely devalued. So just to take on Jennifer's point there, to have some better system of some sort of a better sounding, or I don't know, more expressive way maybe of playing them audio files, because certainly, and again, it's just TunePal I can judge it on. Just bears no resemblance to Irish music to me.
Yes, very. The synthesis of the MIDI files was just MIDI piano. And one of the reasons why I think the PDF, the notation was preferred, is that O'Neill's comes in that form. It is notated, but the way you know O'Neill's is by playing the music and having heard others interpret it and play it. And the way the tunes in O'Neill's is played today is oftentimes not what's printed. Kevin, yeah.
Sorry, I suppose to go on that point, maybe I'm a bit of an anorak here, Bob, right? But even like the notion of records that come out that have been through Pro Tools and all that, they leave me cold. Like all my favourite records in Irish music have been, we say, the likes of Joe Cooley, Tony McMahon and Old Hill, music that's recorded live. Once it goes into the process of the studio, and once it goes through Pro Tools, and once everything is corrected to be perfect, it leaves me, I'm gone at that stage. So,
Jenna?
Yeah, because style is such a big thing. Like, for example, phrasing, and like just such a thing like intonation. Like many people say that what it boils down to in people's style is the intonation. And how can you? That's something very personal. So yeah, there's yeah, I think you know what I'm saying.
So there's so much that's not written in the music.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much that just comes from that person and from the surrounding and from the history and from, yeah, yeah. So, for example, when I had a lesson from Queven O'Reilly a couple of years ago, and he just said to me, "Can you play just 6 notes of a jig, like a start of a jig?" And then he said to me, "Have you been taking lessons or listening a lot to Tommy Peoples?" And he didn't know who I was. He didn't know I had been living in Ennis for quite a long time, sitting in the sessions with Tommy Peoples very much. And he said to me, "You have a high G on your A string there," and that's exactly what Tommy Peoples has as well, or used to have. Yeah. And that I was quite stunned by how he could hear that, like my intonation on my third finger on the A string, that I had been listening to the way Tommy People phrases and intonates that particular note in the tune. Yeah.
There's one question from the audience about, would it have helped if the AI had generated titles for the tunes?
Not really, because then there is no history. So in a way, but in a way, no. I am not sure about that. I have to think about it a little while.
Um,
Yeah.
I work as a national school teacher, and one of the things I often do there is I just play a piece of classical music or a piece of traditional music, and I don't give the kids the title, and I give them a sheet of paper and I ask them to close their eyes and just draw what they see or what they feel. So I often think it's a great thing not to have a title at the start of the tune. That it's amazing what people see and what images come to mind. So I mean, I think if the quality's in the music, strong images will appear, and for the better tunes something did appear, and for the weaker ones it didn't. So I just think inserting a name is basically just kind of just trying to fill a hole before you see it.
Yeah.
There's an interesting phenomena around titles and names of music in Irish traditional music. And some tunes have dozens of names, and other tunes have no name. So that's an observation, I thought. There's also a question here. Would some of the traditional tunes that you play or that are in O'Neill's have evolved out of each other?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
And can you trace that?
Well, I can't. I think I reckon if I could actually sit down and spend time with it, yes, it's not something I've ever actually sat down and proactively went about. But I'd be fairly sure that if I sat down and gave myself a week to get some evidence, I'd be very confident I could find some. Yeah. Just for an example, there, like there's a jig that was played by the Flanagan brothers, and I thought it was one particular jig, and I played it there somewhere recently, and Nicky McAuliffe, the fiddle player, came back to me and said, like, he says half that tune is a tune called the classic jig, and the second basically like the Flanagan brothers had basically put two jigs together to make one jig, and that they kind of evolved out of each other, and then they became a standard for a while. But like Nicky had the two different jigs from two separate collections as separate tunes. So I mean, that's just one example that just springs to mind immediately.
This could be something perhaps modeled within AI.
Yeah, and the other thing is those particular tunes would have been from the era that O'Neill um, took down the tunes. I mean that lots of the tunes that the Flanagan brothers played were in O'Neill's. They are of that era. So that those specific examples, I'm actually quite sure that if I went looking for the tunes in O'Neill's, I'd probably find them as separate jigs.
I think there's been one explicit mention of an AI that you use in your music practices. Kevin mentioned TunePal, and this was created by a group of PhD students, several PhD students, I think, of being able to search and retrieve information based on a few phrases that you play into the application. So as you proceed and participate as a traditional musician, do you see AI as a positive, a plus in your music practices, or do you fear it more so?
I'd see it as a positive because it's a tool that you can go
Henrik,
to. Oh, yeah, yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Paddy.
Sorry, I'd see it as a positive, but I mean, anything new that comes along, I kind of cherry pick what I like and leave what I don't. So I mean, if there's aspects of the technology that I can use for my teaching or my playing or my research or anything like that, I'm going to use it. And anything that doesn't appeal to me, I'm quite happy to leave to one side. So I think with any new advance in music, you've got to take what's applicable to what you're trying to do, and leave what's not. And I think by loads and loads of people doing that over a period of time, the technology kind of evolves into the music kind of seamlessly. So I don't fear it, or I don't think it's a danger to anything, because I think, I mean, in the end of the day, there's loads of really bad tunes. We were discussing this last day in O'Neill's. One of them's called the Jolly Joker, which is a truly dreadful tune. And the bottom line is that generations of Irish traditional musicians have rejected this tune. Nobody plays it anymore. No musician of any standing in Irish music has ever bothered to record it. It's in O'Neill's, but it's a dreadful tune. But so they just reject. So things that are of no use to people, they get rejected, and what is of use to people gets accepted, and that all kind of evolves into the tradition, and everything just moves on.
Henrik.
Yeah, I think
Your sound is cut off. No. No. We'll come back to you. Kevin, you had your hand raised.
Can you hear me, Bob?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I know. Look, actually, Paddy just covered.
different parts are actually. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Can you hear me, Bob? Yeah.
No.
Kevin, go ahead.
Sorry, Bob. Yeah, look, actually, Paddy just covered those points. But you're talking about AI and I suppose maybe computers and what have you. There's a new system out now of uilleann pipes, right? Because of the variables of piping, it's so very, very hard to get a set of pipes that will function properly and work in tune. And this guy over in Spain has invented these uilleann pipes called V pipes. Completely electric set of uilleann pipes, right? They sound like uilleann pipes and everything, right? And it's fantastic, and you can play it through a sound system. And if you close your eyes, you'd find it very hard to distinguish between it and an actual set of pipes. Except they're perfect. They're so perfect. Everything is bang on in tune. Drones are perfectly in tune. And I was over in Spain. It's about 12 years ago. I was playing with the piper Davy Spillane, and he was blown away by this thing. And after about an hour, he just said, he said, it's not the same. I'm not wrestling the beast. And that's the way he said it, because like to him, I'm not wrestling the beast. It's just, he was really blown away for the first hour. He was loving it. Everything was, and then after a while, he missed the little nuances. He missed the little intricacies, the little bit of notes that might be a little bit flat, a little bit sharp, or whatever. So, yeah, it has its advantages, but, I don't think it's...
Mm-hmm. Henrik, are you ready?
Yeah, I hope you can.
Perfect. No, it disappeared again. For some reason, it disappears. Are you using an external mic?
Can you hear me now? There was a bit of instability and instability in the connection.
It's cutting in and out.
My computer said there was some connection problem. Maybe that's what we're having.
Could be. It could be the AI's not liking what we're saying. There is one question from an audience member. Would it be interesting to generate tune families or sets of tunes to listen to different variations to each other?
Can you hear me now? Never mind.
Yes. An interesting challenge to generate tune families. Are there families of tunes in Irish traditional dance music? Or does that concept not exist?
I think there are certain tunes that are associated with certain traditions that have lots of similarities. Say lots of the jigs and the single jigs that are from the Slieve Lucra tradition. I would consider them families of tunes. They're all very suitable for certain types of jig sets and slides and polkas, etc. And I'd consider them families of tunes. And then when you actually look back, the kind of source of these tunes that were all played by the same musicians, and further down the line, the current generation of musicians who play Slieve Lucra music continue to try and play those tunes just as Pádraig O'Keeffe or Johnny O'Leary and those people did. So I consider those types of tunes families of tunes. There's definitely in my head there are kind of families of single jigs, families of slides, families of polkas, and when we start playing in a session, regardless who I'm with, we always gravitate back to those particular types of tunes, and those tunes are always put into sets together. So that's kind of the only kind of idea of families of tunes I have, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. Henrik, are you back?
I hope so. Let's see if I'm actually back now. What was I going to say originally? The AI, the use for AI is different for different people and for different occasions. Like for instance, Brian Duggan, who actually made TunePal, he asked me if I used TunePal, and I said no, I don't. And he was very surprised, but I said it's all in my head, so I don't need it. But other people might need it for identifying tunes. But if they have me, then in a session they don't need it because I know all the names. But I don't see it as a threat, and I think it's different. As Paddy said, different uses will if people find it useful, they will use it. If not, it won't be used.
None of you are going to use a jig generator.
No.
There's no need.
There are enough. There are jigs enough in this world anyway, so plenty of them.
Yeah, it's true. We're running close to the end of the session. In 2 years' time, this competition will run a second or a third version at that time, and I'm thinking that it would focus on reels. Will you be so kind as to come back and be a judge?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I would love to.
Yes.
Yes.
This time being, and Kevin gives us thumb up, this time being audio as well as scores.
Yeah. Lovely.
And we hope for better quality. I think you probably learned from this thing.
Yeah.
Bob, I was wondering next time round, would it be good thing if the panel of judges gave maybe 2 or 3 points of guidance before the contestants begun their endeavours?
Good point.
I mean, I feel sorry, or I think it's hard on the contestants sometimes listening to us giving loads of comments in retrospect, where it would be much more useful to give some comments and some pointers as to what we think read the submissions should include, and then come back and refer to how well they actually engage with the pointers we gave them beforehand, and then it gives everyone a fairer kick of the ball, because not everybody comes from the same background amongst the contestants. Some of them will have a better understanding of the music. I just think that lots of the contestants may benefit from that.
Yeah, that would be very good. I totally agree on that. I had 2 questions also, Bob.
Yes.
I was wondering if some of the contributors, is that what you say?
Sure.
They were also musicians, because some tunes that I was learning from the score, I was wondering if they had been playing through them. But then I realized there were so many, so they probably couldn't, because there were thousands of tunes, right?
Yes.
So that wasn't something that happened, that they had been played through by the...
Yes, and that's actually a question that somebody raised here. Why 10,000 tunes? Is not 20 enough? Well, the reason we chose 10,000 is because there would have been no way for people to cherry pick the best output of their algorithms and play through them.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to try to find a snapshot, at least an honest picture of the possibilities of the algorithm.
Yeah, that's what I figured that. And then can you clarify again why, I mean, what the aim of this was? Because you said it wasn't to spread like 2,000 jigs over the world, but you said it was something about the systems. Can you just say that again?
Yeah, so one of the sticking points of music generation research is in the evaluation of the output of these algorithms. How can we meaningfully evaluate a melody generator or harmonizer? And so this challenge was a way to have a very specific focus on a type of music, and one that's practiced today, so that we can sort of promote a meaningful approach to evaluating music AI using experts as yourselves. Using experts is expensive, of course, and so we wanted to find a way to minimize the expense of that, and by choosing randomly a smaller section and having a multi-stage process of rejection and then spending more time looking at finer points. And then to see how music AI research can benefit from considering traditional music. There's not very many researchers that are considering traditional music in their music AI research. They're oftentimes focused on Bach, harmonization, voice leading, pop music, and this kind of thing. And then to facilitate discussion about the ethics of music AI research applied to traditional music practices. So we oftentimes can't see the harm that our technologies we're developing could unleash upon the world. And this is not an answered question yet. It's still under investigation. But with work with experts like yourselves, we're hoping to at least have the conversation about the ethics of applying AI to traditional music. I see Potty has his hands raised.
Since you began all this process, Bob, have you found that certain genres of music are more applicable to the science?
Sorry, one more time.
Have you found that certain genres of music, whether it's jazz, classical, are actually more applicable for this type of science to be applied to them?
Myself, I'm not sure. There is definitely some understanding that monophonic or homophonic traditions are easier to model with computers than polyphonic, because you have to not only consider the vertical but also the horizontal. But as we've seen in this challenge, we're still very far away from creating an AI that can create and churn out good jigs, with any sort of high probability. Well, I'm happy to hear that you all are willing to come back for another edition. It won't be next year, however, because the challenge next year, let me share my screen. The challenge in 2021 is going to be to build an artificial system that generates the most plausible Scandinavian polskas. So another dance tradition. There are a lot of experts in Stockholm and Sweden that can lend their expertise not only in playing polskas but also dancing. And another thing is oftentimes in playing Scandinavian polskas, you have second voices. And so there is a polyphonic element to this kind of music. So I believe there will be two sub-challenges. One is to generate plausible polskas, and the other is to generate plausible second voices to an existing polska. So two different levels of difficulty. So stay tuned for the 2021 challenge. Again, we're based on the results of this challenge and our experience here, we'll be able to have a richer kind of evaluation, and certainly ask experts beforehand for pointers for researchers to use in building their systems. Are there any final comments from the judges, or perhaps questions that you would like to ask me before we end the session? Yes, Kevin has his hand raised.
No, Bob, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm being really suspicious here. Were those tunes that were plagiarized put in there on purpose?
No, they weren't.
Really?
They weren't.
Because some of them were just so like it, Bob. They were so on the button that,
Y'all did very well in finding them. But no, they weren't put in there.
Fair enough.
And there were no human created tunes in there.
Okay.
No, I was expecting that you might put in some test tunes into the whole batch of tunes that we got. I suspected that you might put in some test tunes just to test the consistency of the judges.
That's a good point, and I think we're going to analyze the scores that you made across these 5 categories and across the tunes to determine the variability and the judge agreeance between the tunes and between the categories. And I may be in touch in the future with asking for some elucidation on particular scores that you've made.
Yeah, I was being more nice in the beginning with my scoring, and then at the end, then I thought, no, I put a 4 instead of a 5, just so I have some more range, to use when the very, very good tune comes. So I think yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did you go through the order in numerical order?
No, yeah. Well, wait. First, I got some, and then I got some more. And so I went through the ones that you sent first, and then the ones you sent after. But no, I didn't do like that. No, I was jumping a little bit around because I only had the numbers. So I was,
Mm,
yeah. First I took the audio files, and then I binned them, and then I took the other ones. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Bob. You play the accordion, right?
Yes.
And you play many accordions.
No, just diatonic button accordion. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is it that yeah, it's you like? What do you love about Irish music?
Well, I first
Your voice
experienced it
is
in
very gone.
2000 when I went to Limerick for a summer to see if I wanted to do a PhD. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I first encountered Irish traditional music in Ireland when I went for a summer in 2000. And when I saw this experience of, very late at night with traditional musicians, I said, this is really something that I want to learn more about. It took me a long time to pick up a diatonic accordion. I tried to imitate it on piano accordion, and it just it wouldn't fit. And so about 6 years ago, no, in 2015, when I really started to get into this research, I was motivated more and more to actually learn it. And so it's actually been this AI research has been a gateway drug for me into traditional Irish music. And so I have a fever for Irish traditional music now.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, that's all the time we have. I really appreciate your contributions to this discussion and your hard work in evaluating these 45, 50 tunes over the past month. And it's going to continue on in the coming years. So we'll welcome you back in a few years.
Thank you very much, and thank you for asking us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Certainly. Take care.
and thank you
Janica
for
and
all
Heinrich,
the. Oh,
And I hope to see you in some sessions soon.
please.
Yeah.
yeah.
Hope so.
All right. Cheers.
In 2023 or something.